Okay, we'll kick off this morning. You're all very welcome to our session on restoration and heritage management. I'd like to introduce our first speaker today, William Holdsworth. William is serving his third term as president of Chesapeake and Ohio Canal Association. He's been an active member of the association since 2004. His affection for the canal began 40 years ago when he moved to Washington, D.C. In his professional life, William has spent 35 years as a systems analyst for the federal government and the last 20 years with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. William.
How do you engage the public when you have a canal that stopped operating 90 years ago? Today I want to tell you about the history of our canal and the restoration efforts we have going on at Williamsport, Maryland. You will notice that I'm speaking in the first person, talking about our canal and the things that we are doing. But let me stress, there's nothing official about my status. I'm not a representative of the National Park Service. I'm just somebody who loves our canal. I'm president of the Chesapeake and Ohio Canal Association. We're a volunteer group that's been supporting the canal for 64 years. The origins of our canal go back a couple hundred years. In 1783, after the American Revolution ended, it opened vast territory west of the Appalachian Mountains for settlement. Those mountains are a 1,600-mile barrier composed of a succession of parallel ridges nearly a mile high. These mountains separated these new Northwest territories from the original 13 colonies. This map shows the settled areas in 1800. You can see the pink populated areas are along the coast. The Northwest territories are unsettled. Now, competition between cities didn't start with professional football. Cities along the eastern seaboard, New York, Philadelphia, Baltimore, and Washington, wondered how they could capture the commerce from these newly settled areas. Without connections to the eastern seaboard, commerce would flow from these Northwest territories down the Ohio River and the Mississippi River to New Orleans, or it would flow up the Great Lakes to the St. Lawrence River and Canada. This map shows the roads and canals that developed in the early 1800s. New York City had the best route, as those of us who attended last year's World Canals Conference in Syracuse learned. The Hudson River cut north through the Appalachian Mountains. The Mohawk Valley provided a fairly level route west. The Erie Canal opened in 1825. It was an immediate success. Other cities wondered how they would respond. Philadelphia and Baltimore planned to use railroads to connect to the west. Since this isn't a railway conference, we won't talk much about them for now. But Washington, D.C. decided to use the Potomac River Valley as its route west. The route of the Potomac River penetrated fairly deep into the mountains, but much of it wasn't navigable. Hence, the Chesapeake and Ohio Canal was born. Traffic from the Chesapeake Bay would flow up the Potomac River to Washington, and from Washington, the canal would follow the river up to Cumberland, and then once it reached Cumberland, the canal would go over the Continental Divide to connect with the Ohio River at Pittsburgh. So on July 4th, 1828, President John Quincy Adams turned the first shovel of dirt for the canal. They planned on building 75 locks, 8 dams, 11 aqueducts, and 1 tunnel en route to Cumberland. Appropriately enough, given the location of our conference today, the majority of the laborers on the canal were Irish immigrants armed with shovels. This photo is not from the original construction. It was taken during some 1930s restoration work done on our canal. The canal company had some financial difficulties and took some shortcuts. Instead of 75 locks, they built 74 locks. Instead of 8 dams, they built 7 dams. But it was the 1 tunnel that almost ruined them. When work started on the Paw Paw Tunnel in June 1836, engineers estimated the work would take just 2 years and cost $33,000. Instead, the tunnel took 14 years to complete and cost more than $600,000. The canal finally opened to Cumberland in 1850. The competing railroad from Baltimore got there 8 years earlier. The canal company was financially exhausted. They never built the last 240 kilometers to Pittsburgh. And here's a photo of that canal that almost ruined the C&O, that almost ruined the canal, the tunnel there, Paw Paw Tunnel. It's nearly a kilometer long, about 3,000 feet. So the builders of the C&O Canal intended to carry a variety of cargo, just as the Erie Canal did. But they never reached the Ohio River. By 1850, the railroad had proved itself superior in hauling passenger traffic and most freight. But the discovery of coal fields around Cumberland saved the canal. The canal could compete with the railroad in hauling coal between Cumberland and Washington, D.C. Over 90% of the canal's revenues came from hauling coal. The steamships of the United States Navy were one of the customers for that coal. This photo shows the canal boats lined up in Washington, D.C. near the downstream end of the canal. The boats were pulled by mules, with a few exceptions. The boats were 90 to 95 feet long, almost 15 feet wide. They carried 120 tons of coal. The 1870s were the most successful period of the canal when over 500 boats operated over the 184 miles. That brings us to Williamsport. The two endpoints of the canal, Cumberland and Washington, D.C., were the most important points. But Williamsport was clearly the third most important point. There's a great valley in the Appalachian Mountains that runs north-south. Williamsport was a crossroads where the canal intersected with that north-south route. South of Williamsport, the valley is known as the Shenandoah Valley, which you may have heard of. Williamsport was a destination for some of the coal leaving Cumberland, so this town of about 1,500 people had a brisk coal trade because of the canal. Williamsport lies next to the Conococheague Creek. The canal crossed that creek on an aqueduct that was 64 meters long. The aqueduct is famous for an accident in 1920. A boat, Canal Towage Company number 73, was empty, headed upstream. Captain Frank Myers was the only person on board. The captain's stepson was leading their 3 mules on the towpath. When the stern of the boat crossed onto the aqueduct, the upstream wall began to collapse. Captain Myers saw the movement in the wall and realized what was going to happen. He called out to his stepson to release the mules. The captain jumped from the boat onto the adjacent berm abutment. Then, as the breach developed, the escaping water carried the boat out of the aqueduct into the creek below. They repaired the aqueduct in 12 days, building a wooden trunk that they used until the canal closed in 1924. And here you can see some pictures, before and after pictures of the aqueduct. The top picture shows the stone aqueduct as it was built. The next picture shows the boat lying in the creek after the accident. And finally, we see the wooden repairs applied to the aqueduct to put it back in operation. Yeah. And even in 1920, people liked checking out the scene of an accident, as they do today. The canal always competed with the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad, which ran on the other side of the Potomac River to Cumberland. The canal always suffered from flooding. Over the life of the canal, 42 significant floods hit the canal. Most floods only damaged small sections. One devastating flood occurred in May 1889. The flood forced the canal company into bankruptcy. That would have been the end of operations, but the competing Baltimore and Ohio Railroad emerged as the majority bondholder for the canal. That railroad wanted to avoid a bankruptcy sale that would allow a competing railroad to buy the canal right of way. So they authorized the repairs to be made. Operations didn't resume until 1891, a year and a half later. Another major flood occurred in March 1924. This one did spell the end of operations. The railroad decided it wasn't worth the investment to make the repairs required. Operations ceased, and the canal fell into disrepair. Another major flood occurred in 1936, ending any hope of resuming operations. This picture shows Williamsport in 1936, and the canal would run about here, and as you can see, it's completely underwater. So, and if those of us listening to the news from Washington, D.C. now are worried about what this week's hurricane is going to do to our river next week. They're sandbagging things on the canal today as we talk. So the federal government acquired the canal 2 years later in 1938 during the Depression. The Baltimore and Ohio Railroad had borrowed money from the federal government, who agreed to forgive part of the debt in exchange for the canal. World War II then intervened. After the war, one proposal would have converted the old canal to a highway. The local newspaper, the Washington Post, supported the idea. Fortunately, there was one person who opposed this idea, and that was U.S. Supreme Court Justice William O. Douglas, pictured there in the photo. He was an outdoorsman and a conservationist. He often hiked along the canal and wanted to see it preserved as a sanctuary along the Potomac River. In 1954, Douglas wrote a letter to the editors of the Washington Post. He challenged the editors to hike the canal with him. They accepted. So Douglas, the editors, and representatives of other conservation groups spent 9 days hiking the 184-mile canal. That hike has become legend among people like me who love the C&O Canal. The hike rallied public opinion. The Washington Post changed its editorial position. 17 years later, Congress passed a law creating the Chesapeake and Ohio National Historical Park in 1971. Since 1971, the towpath has always been popular with hikers and bikers. Our association has sponsored 2-week-long, end-to-end hikes many times in the past. There are 30 campsites along the towpath. Each has potable water, a fire ring, a picnic table, and a portable latrine. A big change in recent years has been the connection to the Great Allegheny Passage at Cumberland. This map shows the connection. The Great Allegheny Passage is on the left-hand side of the map. The passage follows a series of abandoned railroads. Ironically, its route is somewhat similar to the path the C&O Canal would have taken to Pittsburgh had they built it. We've seen a surge of usage since 2009. Many bicyclists enjoy the challenge of riding 540 kilometers between Pittsburgh and Washington. Businesses and bed and breakfast inns have sprung up to cater to the bikers. Amtrak has installed bike racks on its trains between Washington and Pittsburgh. Right now, Williamsport is the biggest single site along this canal with over 400,000 visitors in 2016. Yet there's an opportunity to substantially increase the visitation. Williamsport is still a crossroads. Every day we have 125,000 cars whizzing through the nearby junction of the 2 interstate highways. You can see that junction in the upper right-hand corner there. Can we persuade even a small fraction of them to stop and visit? Williamsport offers a dense array of historic structures. If we use them right, we can attract more visitors and educate them about the canal. So here we have an aerial view of Williamsport highlighting our attractions. The area is about 900 meters long. Working from left to right, we have the aqueduct over the creek there. It's labeled number 8, with the number 8 there. We've got a historic warehouse on the basin right next to it. That's labeled with number 6. In front of the warehouse, we have the basin. A little bit further to the right, we have a railroad lift bridge. That's labeled as number 2 on the map. And then further downstream, then at Lock 44, we have an operable lift lock, number 3, and a lock tender's house, number 4. You may wonder what that big black area is south of the canal there. That was a coal-fired power plant. It is closed since this photo was taken. Our goal is to create the single most complete canal boat experience in North America. National Park Service will use the 1920s as what they call their period of significance, which means they are restoring structures to appear as they did at that time. It will be the only place where visitors can experience firsthand crossing over a rewatered stone aqueduct. They would pass under a railroad lift bridge and then down to a working lift lock. We will use electric launch boats for the tours. The park acquired a pair of these 10 years ago. There were similar boats during the operational period of the canal, as shown on the right. We have completed much of the work we need to bring this vision to reality. The lock tender's house at Lock 44 has been rehabilitated. The house is a destination for school groups visiting the canal. They can see antique furniture from the period and interpretive materials. The trolley barn wasn't a canal structure, but it does date to the era. The building was constructed in 1896 to generate electricity for the local tram system. It burned coal transported via the canal and used water from the nearby creek. We have rehabilitated the interior and use it as a classroom space for visiting school groups. It has several hands-on exhibits for the students. The Cushwa warehouse, in the lower right, operated throughout the canal period. The building sits on the edge of the canal basin. The warehouse dealt in coal, brick, flour, iron, and cement. We have rehabilitated it into our visitor center. We use it as a starting point for the launch boat tours. As I mentioned, there's a railroad lift bridge that crosses the canal. We had to raise the bridge and lock it in position to allow boats to travel from the warehouse and the aqueduct down to Lock 44. We're lucky to have that lift bridge. It was built only 1 year before the canal stopped operating. Fortunately, 90 years later, it's still there. Because we plan to operate the lift lock at the downstream end of the area, we had to construct a new water intake system to ensure that we have enough water in the basin to operate the boats. We restored Lock 44 to operating condition. We plan to take launch boats down through the lock as the downstream turnaround point for the visitor's journey. Of course, the centerpiece of our effort is the aqueduct restoration. The project will repair the foundations and arches. It will rebuild the missing spandrel walls and replace the parapet wall. The project is scheduled for completion in spring 2019. We will water the aqueduct. There will be a small basin at the upstream end to allow the launch boats to turn around. Here you can see an upstream view from June earlier this year. You can see the cofferdams they built for the aqueduct work. The project will place a structural floor within the aqueduct. The entire structure will be repointed and cracked stones repaired. Here's another view looking downstream. Divers retrieved some of the original stones that fell in the creek in the 1920 accident. They will use what they can in the effort. Because the restoration is replicating the post-accident appearance, the park will end up with more stones than it can use. What they'll do is they'll bury the extra stone on site just in case there is a future effort to build the original stone wall on the aqueduct. The park has an award-winning education program. For several years now, all fourth grade classes in the surrounding county have been visiting the Canal Basin as part of their normal curriculum. Our association has helped fund these visits. The park makes materials available to the classroom teachers in preparation for the visit. The park has recruited a Canal classroom corps consisting mostly of retired teachers. They assist with the visits. The visits are multifaceted. I'll quote from the park's materials that they provide to the teachers. As a result of visiting the Canal Basin, students should be able to, 1, define the purpose and importance of national parks. 2, describe the C&O Canal as an early transportation system. 3, explain the concepts and effects of various earth processes, including weathering, erosion, and flooding. 4, examine plants and wildlife using binoculars. These school trips help promote overall visitation. We find that if students have an enjoyable time, they return with their families on the weekend, showing mom and dad what they've seen. These restoration projects took years to accomplish. The National Park Service money came from the National Recreation Fee Program. The two Maryland programs used were a Transportation Alternatives Grant Program and a Maryland Bikeways Grant. Local support from the county and the town were critical in obtaining the funding. And so what I'll do is I will close by saying that I hope you'll come visit us in Williamsport, maybe in 2021, as we celebrate the 50th anniversary of the creation of our park. Thank you.
Thank you, William. I hope everybody find that interesting. Our next speaker today is Theron Robson. Theron is a chartered civil engineer and has worked for 12 years in the structures and buildings section of Waterways Ireland. Since late 2017, Theron is now the senior engineer for operations on the South Shannon. Theron.
you. Good morning. Okay, I'm just going to fill up a glass of water here. Okay, I'm with you today to give you a brief insight into some of the work that Waterways Ireland are doing on the River Shannon. And taken in the context of restoration. So I'll present some of the work that we've been doing on the lots on the Shannon system, and outline our approach to gate assessment and prioritisation of maintenance, and then share some of our experience of very recent works. I'll then try and take you through some of our particular problems and some of the actions that we've taken to respond to those particular problems. Of course, as a now Western Region engineer, we are, of course, the jewel in the crown of the 7 waterways under our management. I'll just take you through a few facts of the Shannon system. So it's arguably 360 kilometres long. There is some questions about how long it is. It's a natural river course, but it's heavily regulated in its flow management, and that's largely coordinated between us and the ESB. So there's 7 primary locks on the navigation, with adjacent weirs controlling the flows, plus a double lock at Ardna Crusher, which some of you will have visited yesterday, and then a tidal lock down in Sarsfield in Limerick. At the top of the system, the ordnance level is only 48 metres, dropping to 32 at Ardna Crusher. So it's a drop of only about 16 metres in 230 kilometres. So it's a very flat, gentle navigation with 7 modest steps in it. The boat use on it at the moment is approximately 45,000 lock passages per year. It's predominantly in the April and October season. Albert Lock in the north is the most heavily used lock, with approximately 8,000 passages per annum. But the rest of the locks are reasonably similarly and equally used, with about 5,000 passages per year. The split of boat users is approximately 50% private and 50% rental. You probably can't even see that, but that's so we take a regular record, and we determine at every lock we're measuring and recording which are rental and which are private. And in fact, it also shows that the annual usage has stayed fairly stable for the last 3 or 4 years. So what are the issues on our lock maintenance that have arisen? Basically, we have a mixture of the traditional and full timber gates, and then we have some that have been replaced with a steel core and a timber post and heel. The hydraulic ram system, they're all operated by hydraulic ram system, which replaced a winch and chain system a little over 20 years ago. One of the impacts of this is that it introduces a significantly higher load on the gate, and we found that is one of the reasons why the gates are deteriorating. It's pulling the timber joints apart. So we have 200-year-old lock chambers with lock gates that are 50 to 70 years old, and a number of them are causing us more and more problems. We were having problems where only one gate would work, for example, in Tarnbarry 4 or 5 years ago, and then in Victoria, which is a lock gate below us, it has a wheel and rail support system on the base of the lock, and the wheel had fallen off the rail, and so one of the gates failed about 6-7 years ago. So, sorry. So another factor that's influencing what we can do is that in the last 10 years, not all but most of our locks and our adjacent areas have been designated protected structures by the local county councils. This imposes a number of constraints on us on what we can do and the processes we have to go through to do any significant works. So our maintenance strategy is a biannual condition survey by the engineer, and then monthly, we have a monthly facility inspection process by our area foreman, either on the North or the South Shannon. And then anything more, if anything significant happens, obviously we mobilise and the necessary resources to look at it. In 2014, we commissioned a more detailed independent assessment of our lock gates, really to support our own assessment and aspiration that we needed more money to be allocated to do some essential maintenance works. And so we appointed Jeremy Ben Associates and Eden Consulting to look at all the locks along the river. That report was submitted in 2014, and it informed it supported our own view, and it informed our actions going forward. So it allowed us to support our own prioritisation and to make a budget request submission. That process fundamentally prioritised five of the locks for work. The priority was viewed to be Tom and Barry because the gates were leaking badly. There were problems with the land tie collars, and the gates were nearing the end of their effective working life. And then it followed Rooskey, Victoria, Athlone and Albert. So priority number one, Tom and Barry, was addressed in 2014. We did this due to limitations of our own resources. We decided to go out to contract to replace the 4 lock gates and also do repairs to the lock chamber and replace the land tie collars. There's a contract for that was awarded to LMN Keatings, a Clare-based contractor, and they went to British specialist Martin Charles for the lake provision. That lock closed in 2014 season to allow works to be implemented over the closed season of 2014-2015. So the primary works on that were masonry repairs that we needed to relay some of the coping stones. We needed to grout sections of the sill that were leaking, and we replaced the 4 lock gates. The land tie collars were also replaced, and we, in that project, went to, I think it was Eden who gave us a design input, and we replaced the traditional land tie collars with a fairly heavily engineered steel land tie collar. We also replaced the existing cast iron land tunnels with stainless steel and did other miscellaneous works. Some of the, I'm not going to give you much more on Tom and Barry, because I'm going to move on to the next 2 that we've done more recently, but some of what we did at the end of that experience, it wasn't a totally satisfactory experience for us. We found that there were problems with the gate installation. We found that the seals were poor on the gates once they were installed. We had issues about the land tie collars. We still have some of those issues. So the timber seals, in fact, the gates were so poorly sealed, we actually had to introduce a timber seal along the sill and up the coin to mitigate against the leakage that happened after immediate installation. And as any of you who are boaters you'll see, this is a fairly heavily engineered land tie collar. The problem that we are still encountering is that the anchorage and the interaction with the stonework is not satisfactory, and it's tending to break. So it's an ongoing problem. We're still looking at it, but the heavy engineered solution is not performing the way the engineers would aspire for it to. So then we moved on to the more recent works has been on Ruski and Victoria locks. And that Tom and Barry experience resulted in decisions being taken on how we would proceed with that installation. So rather than going out to a contractor, and in the Tom and Barry experience, we got one valid tender when we went out to tender. We reviewed our own capacity, and we made the argument that, in fact, we would be better off trying to implement the project with our own in-house resources. Although the specialist gates, the large gates, we don't have the capacity to make. So we commissioned gate manufacture and supply by others, but with the intention that we would install the gates and refurbish the locks. And wherever possible, the experience of the land tie collars and the experience of the sluices, we applied for both Ruski and Victoria the principle that we would refurbish and we would reuse and we would renovate anything that we could within the existing facility. The schedule of works for this was to install a cofferdam and dewater the chambers at the end of the boating season, which for us is fundamentally the end of October. So we closed both locks in November of 2016. We inspected them ourselves, and we facilitated surveys by the gate manufacturers. Because one of the issues on Tom and Barry was that clearly the gates that were provided were actually too big, and there was a lot of trimming to them. And that was at least in part because they measured them when the chamber was wet. So in both Ruski and Victoria, we facilitated a dry dock, a dry lock inspection and measurement. And so the contract for the supply was won by Widmer Kampen, who are a very competent Dutch organisation, and they came over and surveyed in the autumn of 2017. No, they didn't. 2017. They came over and surveyed at the end of 2016, and they started manufacturing the gates in 2017. The Ruski installation was then taken over by our North Shannon operations team, and the Victoria installation by our South Shannon operations team. I'm now going to, some of you may have already seen this, but I'm going to take you through, it's a very good record of the whole works for Ruski, and I'm going to take you through this video and do a little bit of a live voiceover on some of the pertinent points. So the new gates were manufactured in Ecke, in the Netherlands by Widmer Kampen, and arrived by road hours before Storm Ophelia actually arrived on the 9th of October 2017. The Ruski gates came fully assembled as a wide load. The Victoria gates came disassembled because of the size of the gates. So this shows the old lock chamber. Divers being mobilised, commercial divers, to support us in the installation of the cofferdams. There's Inishmullen, who is the sister boat to the Kailinoig, which is outside of the building. So here, this is showing us installing our cofferdams. Which have to be, the divers are basically required to wedge the cofferdam against the slot, and then good old peat is used to seal the leaks. So we then stripped back all we could off of the existing gates, all the metalwork, for potential reuse. So that was stripped down and sent away for sandblasting, some repairs, and then painting. Each time we dewater the lock, we have to electrofish to protect the fish. So we tried to, I think we reused 3 of the land tie collars. We reused the land tunnel sluices, but not the gate sluices. The gate sluices were considered to be past refurbishment. And then we completed some work on the lock chamber. We rebored the pots because there was wear in them, and the new gates got new stainless steel pintles installed in them. And you see on this one it has a steel collar over the heel post, and that's to help distribute the load of the hydraulic ram. Which McCampen then came up with some innovative suggestions on how that they install and build lock gates in the Netherlands, and I think the two lads that came over did about 45 in a year or something. And so one of the elements was a mitre piece that is bolted to the mitre post, and that is then facilitates the trimming. So the works was completed in February 2017. Here we're reinstalling the walkways over the gates, and reopened to boat traffic in February 2018, having been closed for less than 4 months, and a full gate replacement with 2 new sluices, 2 refurbished sluices, and reusing whatever we could in terms of the metal. Credit for all of this, all the people you're seeing in the video are from our North Shannon operations team, and then our site engineer Annette Nally looked after it, and the senior engineer Eamon McMorrow oversaw it. Annette obviously got such a kick out of it, she's taken a career break to celebrate. And in fact, Eamon McMorrow's retiring on the back of it, so. Okay, so I think we'll let this run to the end, which is very nearly here, or not. As one of the first boats is seen to arrive in the newly refurbished Ruski locks. So moving south into the real jewel in the crown, the South Shannon, we have Victoria lock gates. So these are the lock gates in 2015. These gates, you can't see it here, but you'll see it later. These gates have a wheel and rail support, which takes approximately 30% of the load. They have no balance beam, and we were having serious problems with the lower gates. They're about 6.5 meters vertically and in the curved profile horizontally. So the primary works elements in Victoria was to replace the lower gates, to replace or refurbish the wheel and the rail, the pod and the pintle, and the sill, which was also damaged by the damage in the wheel. And also to upgrade the hydraulic lifting system. So this work was undertaken by our South Shannon operations staff, supported by a few specialist contractors. Michael McKeon, a technician who many of you probably know, oversaw a lot of the work. The lads on the Kylan Oak boat outside would have done a lot of the on-water boat and the towing up. So we'll now take you through some of the specific challenges of the Victoria location, if you don't know it. It's quite an isolated location. It's accessible only by small rural road. It has a 2.5 meter wide bridge with a 30-ton weight restriction on it. It can only be accessed from one side. We had to work out how we were going to be able to lift 20-ton gates out and 20-ton gates in to this location. And the size of the curved timber profile was a challenge for us, because it's the only ones we've been working on for a long time. So these photos take you through some of the steps of the works in Victoria. So we moved from, obviously, the lock gates in 2015, and so we looked at a number of craneage options. We looked at building a gantry crane on site. We looked at building a crane in part on site. But we had all these restrictions of getting the equipment in, and in the end we reverted to a crawler crane on our pontoon platform, and we had to load this on south of Port Humner, and then the Innish Culture outside, or the Innish Mullin, I think it was actually, towed the crane up in about 2-3 hours up the river to Victoria. So we were working at the capacity of this crane. We had to get the crane as close as we could to the gates, because we had about 20 tons, and the gates ended up being about 20 tons. So the old gates actually came out heavier than the new gates were going in. We're not exactly clear why, but obviously the cast iron elements were on them. So this is the old gate going out, the working platform in Victoria Lock, and then the gates as viewed in Munster Harbour on the way down. The new gates came in, as I mentioned earlier, in a disassembled form, because we couldn't get that load on the Irish roads. So they arrived in Munster Harbour, where we have a base, and then our lads with some 2 or 3 operatives from Wismacampen assembled them in 3 days. That was the main timber gates. We then had to start putting on the auxiliary elements, like the wheel, which was refurbished, and the sluices. We then loaded a gate on, and then it was taken up to Victoria Lock. At Victoria Lock, we had to get specialist contractors in to plane the cast iron rail in situ, and to rebore the pots which received the pintle. The photo on the left is the contractors working on that. And then we lifted in the gates with the same crane. We had to do them one at a time. We had to, because of the loading restrictions on the barge. So we put one in, then we went and got the other one. So the fourth photo, shows the gate in. Photo of the dewatered lock. It's a pleasure. It's a beautiful lock. The quality of the work is just is astounding, and the verticality is a thing to behold. The second photo shows the wheels on. The third one shows the refurbished lock gates on, and the final photo shows the gate operational. In our case, we took a month longer. We got it open in March of 2018. So some of the elements that we learned a number of things from this whole process. One of it was that you can restore sometimes more than you think you can, and so the sluices were stripped back. They were taken away. We got new brass plates. We refurbished all the metalwork, and they are reinstated on the gates as was. So how old the sluices are, we're not sure, but the other gates were 70 years old. So the same sluices are on the new gates with some improvements to the hydraulics. Just wrapping up, the 2 other elements. The old pintle was replaced with a new pintle, and the reinforcement cap on the heel is there to distribute the load, as mentioned previously. That's a picture of the bolted mitre piece. And I'm to wrap up, so I will move to the lessons that we've learned from this. And the lessons that we've learned, I think, are that there's limited commercial expertise in the heritage lock sector. Waterways Islands has quite a skilled workforce, and we need to recognise and value that. There's plenty to be learned from other people's experience, and the final conclusions that I have is that After some years of neglect, the lock gates on the Shannon are progressing. We've learned from our forefathers, we've learned from our experience, we've learned from each other, and the retention and legacy of skills is essential if Waterways Ireland are going to continue to have the capacity to deliver in the future. Thank you. And if you have any questions, my colleagues in the audience will answer.
Thank you, Theron. Our final speaker today is Roger Alsater. He's the Managing Director of the Gota Canal Company and has been that since September 2016. Roger has, under his direction, the company has entered a new and exciting phase and facing many challenges as to the part of the project and a modernisation of the company, venturing further into fields such as digitisation and preemptive maintenance. In the past, he has served as the Managing Director of ASM Foods, Radio & Co, as well as a management position at ICA. Roger.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. This is my second conference, and I enjoy it very much. I got the challenge. I have the last slot before lunchtime, the last day. This is really a tough situation, so could everybody stand up? Say hello to each other and then sit down again. So I see that you are awake still, so thank you very much for that. I'm going to talk about the company, Gota Canal, a little bit where we are now and our mission, because that's linked together with the big renovation program that we are right in now. That's linked because of the owner, the willing from the owner with the company. It's very important to have the support from the owner and the stakeholders. But I hopefully you follow the link. This is Gota Canal. I hope some of you have been there. You can go by boat from Stockholm to Gothenburg, cross the country, left hand in the bottom there, you see the Swedish south part. You can actually go across Sweden. You need also go through Trollhätte Canal. But there you can go, and then you see the natural water flow in the profile. It's 5 big lakes that we are linked together. And here we have some facts. Starting 1810, we was finished 32. Lot of soldiers who was digging because 87 kilometers dig by hand. 58 locks. 50 lock houses that we need to take care of. Actually, we have 400 houses to take care of. Lot of bridges that we are operating in the summer, but 8 of them is our own, also operating and take care of. We are also 3 million visitors, so we are a rather big destination for the tourist industry. And that's also impact us to be a safe destination when we're talking to our owners. You see the sheep on the page. When we start in the season, we have 100 of them. When we ended up in the season, we have 300 of them. So, so they're really good. We have 150 contracts who's linked to Gota Canal, who's have their own business, but we're working together very heavily and also to support each other. But they are doing the destination of Gota Canal and very important for us. When I joined the company, the board says to me that they want a new business plan with a little bit other focus. So you see the mission there. That's what's from the beginning, from 810. And our vision is actually to be the most attractive tourist destination in Sweden. And that's every tourist destination. So we are rather putting a big goal on the table. But our owner are supporting this, and of course, when they're supporting, they need also to help us with funding the money, of course. But that we're putting into 2020, but with vision 2030. So when you're doing this, you need to have the support. We are a state-owned company, so actually we need to have the ministers and other stakeholders actually on the boat to understand what we're doing, what our needs are, to really to have a safe destination. That's really the link here, and also that they understand. They're sitting in the capital, Stockholm, and they need to come out to see how beautiful it is, the impact we are doing, the supporting on actually entrepreneurs, how they can live on this site, and also that we are open actually every day, the whole year. The boat season is May to September. For the land visitors, we are open every day over the year, and we are responsible for the safety. It's a little bit funny. I have also a video, almost the same, so sorry for that, but that's the life when you're after one. We also discussing in the company what is our core know-how, because we are a rather small company compared to the big renovation program, and the know-how we should have in the company is to renovate the lock and the bridges. The rest we can actually get the contractor to do, but this competence we should have in the company. We should bring the know-how to the next generation so we don't miss it, because it's difficult to find it on the street, this know-how. So here a little bit what we're doing under the winter. You see our headquarters, the yellow house behind us. These guys and ladies are actually our heroes at the company. They know how to have the locker in good shape. So normally we do in the videos with the commercial side of it, but this is really good video that we're using a lot to show that we're doing a lot, that we have a lot know-how in the company. Okay, over to this small project, Gota Canal 2.0. Actually, in-house, we say Gota Canal 200 years more, and that's the ambition. And it's the largest renovation program since the build 1810, so it's a huge program. And again, this program, this organization is actually a little bit outside Gota Canal as a company because it's so big. So if we should bring it in the organization, we should have no chance to handle the normal maintenance, the normal way of working. We have been more than 80 projects is completed or ongoing, so we do heavily lot. My colleagues down here says it's a new canal. It is almost. I will go through it a little bit. The goal to do this is actually to have the canal operating and a safety. That's the main target to this project. But also when I joined the company, the backlog on the maintenance was heavily. And also to have control over what do we need to do today, tomorrow, or the day after that. Every screw or small things, so we have control over the needs. So we don't, when we go home, we don't leave a big backlog for the next generation. That was also one of the things. So now we have invent the whole system, everything we have in a system, data system, so we know exactly what we need to do each day, each year, each 10 years, each 20 years, whatever. So we know the needs on actually people or money. The third one is also we have a new dam law. The regulation of that is increasing. We need to do more things. We need to shape up some things. We need to change some way of working so we can follow that, because it's under that law, and it has been see and so a little bit here and there. So we need to step up on the safety thing also there. And the third one, of course, is actually Gota Canal. This is a very famous brand. Everybody know what it is almost in Sweden, and we cannot have accident, and we don't want to have accident. The people get hurt. It need to be safe. And also in the bottom you see what is the system that we are looking at. The water system is actually of course the waterway that we see, but also the system around the canal, because that's impact heavily also on the behavior. I will come back on that. You know this, you see the waterway is shiny, it's silver, it's nice, and you see the trees, it's nice. It's still nice, but underwear have happened a lot. Regarding many years boating, many years also a little bit bad maintenance. We don't have the money all the time, and also the propeller. When it was building here, that was thinking about almost everything. But the invention of propeller come later, so they didn't have that in the plan. So that also have caused a lot of damage under the water. So actually, this is a sign. It's in Sweden, but probably you can understand warning. You cannot go here because of safety. This was popping up 3, 4, 5 years ago, more and more on different places, because the canal told us that they need some love here and there, was breaking down some here and there. We didn't have the control over it. We was running behind. So this was happening. It was collapsing. Here you see the land who is collapsing down into the canal because of the water system outside was not in function. Here also a kai who was standing, and behind it was almost empty. It was near to collapse. And we have a lot of this. And then we said to the owner, now we need to do something. Otherwise, we need to close down part of Gota Canal. And it's your choice to do it or not. So they told us, okay, you need to do 2 investigations. One, what is the cost to close it down? The other one, okay, what do you need to have it up and running again? And we did that, and of course, they go for have it up and running, and we say we need roughly 55 million euro. It's a lot of money, but that's to actually come to take away the backlog of the maintenance parts. No more, no less. Come up to get some breath when you're diving. That's the situation. So here I have some overview of some project. I will not go deep into that, but you will see a little bit what we have done. Here we have a place that's called Norsholm. You see the canal, you see the yellow line. The yellow line should be the towpath, but it is not here, you see, it disappear. It's in the canal. Here is actually one of the places that we say, okay, here we can go 1 or 2 more years, then we need to block it to close it down because of the safety. Yeah. So you see the profile. I don't see the profile because it's no profile here. You see it's more or less empty. And here you have the material in the canal bank have slowly get into the canal, and also the depth in the canal is not what it should be. So the big boat, we have passenger boat, cannot go there. They're going at roughly 1 meters line that they can use. So here we stopped, and also it's 500 meter, and the construction is that we're putting in these trees in the canal bank to have it stabilize. So we used 2,101 of these on a length of 500 meter. And the guy in the white helmet, he's pointing out where they should put it. The guy in the red helmet is looking only on the machine because it was so bad geotechnical conditions. So they need to see so it stands still, actually. And here you see the profile on the other side, and you see what's in the canal, and also what's in the front, and also on the right-hand side, actually up there the water was. And when we do it, we go all in. We're doing the canal bank, we're doing a good towpath so we can have hikers. Here we also put a place where people can take a coffee break. We want them to come out to visit our destination. Here they can have a coffee, they can even have a barbecue if they want. We have also some signs, information what we have done. You see us also in the back, you have some trees, so they can really have a reason to go here. And also when we do the all-in, we have also our tree alley. It's a big tree alley whole system. From the beginning, approximately was 16,000 trees. Some of them have been old, some of them have been collapsed in the storm, some have some illness, so now we roughly have 10,000 trees. So our owner says also you should come back slowly on that. So when we do this renovation, we put new trees when it's empty. So we do it the whole way. So here, normal maintenance here on this place, then we will probably can use this for 100, 150 years, something like that. Here another place, Söderköping, Tegelbruket Mem is between. Here you see the towpath is wet, it's a lot of water. It should not be that because this is in the middle of the summer. But here we have also very bad geotechnical condition. This is a seabed, old seabed, this area, and it's sinking a lot. And also Baltzar von Platen, who is the founder of Göta Canal, 1834, he said already there, this is the problem spot of Göta Canal. So here we are actually doing a new system. We take away the canal bank. When you see this, you start to be a little bit scary, but here we do it. And we are changing to new material. You see in the middle, this is the profile. We are changing to lighter weight. It's actually a foam glass that we are putting in there. Take away the old material, who's very heavy. Because when it's heavy and it's sinking, we put in new material on. It's get even heavier and sinking even faster. And this has been continuous for many years. Now we say we cannot do that anymore. So now we have done this. And also the ceiling side is on the right-hand side, that we have a new system for it. So here we put in the material, here we have the clay. We use that, of course, and then we have a rubber matting. On top of that, this is using in harbors, airports, and so on, so it's really you can stretch it very hard. And here you see the system. I will not go into the details, only overview. And here is done. So one third of this the distance is done this winter. We will do the rest this winter is coming. And here also, again, we are running behind. We should start to do some inspection on this quay in Sjötorp. So we lower the water slowly, very, very slowly for 2 years ago. And then it's this breakdown come. The guy say, you need to do something, I need some love now. So we're starting, so actually instead to do the inspection, we need to really create the new way to do this. So here we have this before a year ago, before the starting of the season. So we have this new quay, and then we see the rest of it we have done this winter. And of course, when you're doing this kind of work, it's always popping up something you don't know, even here. So we have always something to do, something to rework. But here's the material that we have using for this 155 meters of quay. And hopefully this will stay 100, 150 years also before we need to do. And also we do the whole way here also. We're doing which it should look like from the beginning, more or less, on top. Another kai, here we have actually done the scanning of it, underwater scanning, so you can see it's very bad, and then we have a small collapse in the middle. The kai come before us to say you need to do the work. We was almost there, but not this time. And also here, we need to, of security reason, block this area, and we have an entrepreneur who have her business there over the summer. So we say, okay, we need to remove the house when we do the job. We will do this winter. So we do it before the season. So actually we move the house. You see it on the right-hand side there. We move the house, actually. And it worked very well. So they have opened this summer also and have a good business. So that's good. But it looked very bad underneath. And we do some P-arms. I have a few minutes still there, so I will go quickly through. These have also been collapsed out in Vänern, a big lake. But here we're doing, putting together the old stuff. So it really looks like it did from the beginning. But inside we're using the new way of working to really have it strong. Yeah, we're doing a lot, mixing up new technology with the old one. And also here we have a firewall. I will go through it. You see it here. Here is dangerous. It's not a safe place when it's windy, a lot of waves, or cloudy. So here we are starting this summer actually to do a new way, a lot of thinking how to do it, but also these guys was working over the season, and we think it's very good that they are doing it, because then our guests can see that we are doing things. So normally they don't see it because it's underwater. And also this, yeah, you see by yourself, the yellow line should be the canal bank line, and it's dropped into it. And here we have the profile as it was from the beginning, from 1800 something. We do it exactly because today they have the digital thing stuff, so they can do it actually on 1 millimeter near the profile. So it's very good. And you see this tree we have putting in. Actually, we have using 25,000 of these this summer because this is the weakness side, the canal bank on the eastern side of us because of the geotechnical condition. So this is when it's done. Here we have another part. You see two yellow lines. The lightest of them is the community's fiber net. So it's popping up here. But here's the same. We're doing the profile from the beginning. Putting back the stone and the tree on the correct way. And also this is going through a big city, so a lot of people have been looking. We have got a lot of questions, but a lot of very, very positive stuff. So it's really, really nice. Now we'll stop because my time is out. This is more, we have a lot to do, but we're catching up, so we hope this winter we will take the decision what we will do, not the canal give us the signal what we should do. And this is actually a movie from the summer. This is also Gota Canal in a good way. Sorry, but it's in Swedish. So, thank you very much.
Okay, I'd like to thank all of the speakers today. I think you'll all agree that the speakers have captured the very essence of this session on heritage and restoration. And it's nice to see, as a member of the Waterways Ireland management team, that other companies throughout the world have similar issues as we do and similar challenges. So I'd like to open the floor to some questions. We just have a short few minutes left before we close the session. So, yeah, this gentleman here.
I'm not familiar with curved gates. Is there an advantage?
Yeah, it's just in terms of, it's like a, they are what they. I mean, answer the question. It's like an arch. It's an arch. So you're getting the strength in the arch. But we are restoring what's there, but they must be curved for their strength.
Anybody else with any questions? Yep, this lady here.
Hello, this is for Theron. Given the problems you had in installing the gates at Victoria because of the isolated position and everything, how did they manage it 70 years earlier?
Well, that was partly what we were interested to find out. We couldn't find it out, and we weren't even sure whether it was 70 years or 90 years. It's actually quite an interesting lock, because I think we have at least 4 generations of lock keepers there. And we were asking Tom if his grandfather, if he could remember his grandfather talking about gate replacement, and he couldn't. So they're 70 to 90 years old. We think they probably built a crane or craneage on site.
Okay, anybody else? Yeah, gentleman here.
Just a quick one. This conference was in Sweden, I think, 13 years ago. Those of us that were there remember Lake Vättern because we had a storm right in the middle.
I've heard about that, yes.
My thought was, in days of old, presumably the boats had to sail across. How do you cope with inexperienced boaters these days and get them across the lake safely?
We have 3,000 pleasure boats. Half of them go in the whole canal, so they're crossing all the lakes, even this one. I should say we're trying to inform them on a good way before they're starting, but often sail people to each other, give experience, and they give some information when it's good weather or bad weather, because the biggest Lake Vättern, you know, when the white boat was, and there was rather many was puking, what I understand. It's a tough lake, but we try to inform, but they inform each other very well today, in between each other, I should say.
Do you actually have to stop some boats when you believe there's a big storm coming?
We inform them, but the captain is the owner of the boat, so they take the decision by themselves. But of course, we inform that it's good if you're staying, of course. And sometimes we put them in the canal also to be safer, because, you know, Motala, the harbor there, is close to the open water, so we put them in the canal when it's very heavy weather to have a more safety place.
Okay. One last question. Anybody else? No? Okay. Just before we finish the session, I have just a quick announcement to make. The concluding plenary will now take place earlier than it states in the programme. It will no longer be at 3:30, but is taking place 15 minutes earlier, at 3:15 in the Marina Suites 1 and 2, which will now be combined following this session. Okay, I'd like to thank our speakers here today. I'll give them all a round of applause. They did very well. Thank you. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.